and welcome to episode number 3 of a meta guide to Bulls. In this series I'm taking a look at every song on the SPARKS album Bulls and I'm putting them all into a particular context, and that is of a band who are trying to break out of their record deal in order to win back their creative freedom. In today's episode I'm talking about Scheherazade, which is a song all about storytelling, so it seems fitting to start by telling the story of Scheherazade. In the Middle Eastern collection of tales known as 1001 Nights, the story of Scheherazade stands out as a captivating narrative of wit, strategy and the transformative power of storytelling. The tale unfolds with the Persian king Scheherazade, who, embittered by his wife's betrayal, resolves to marry a new virgin each day, then execute her the next morning to prevent any further infidelity. Enter Scheherazade, the vizier's daughter, who volunteers to be the next bride with a plan to halt the king's brutal spree. On the first night of their marriage, Scheherazade begins to narrate a fascinating story to Scheherazade, but intentionally leaves it unfinished. The king, intrigued, delays her execution to hear the end of the tale. Night after night, she tells a story, each time withholding the ending and beginning a new one, thereby capturing the king's attention for 1001 nights. Through her stories, Scheherazade subtly imparts lessons of justice, compassion and love, gradually transforming Shahriar's perception of life and of women. Her tales are not just entertaining, but also imbued with deep moral insights. As time passes, Shahriar, deeply influenced by her narratives and wisdom, falls in love with Scheherazade. He renounces his cruel vow, marking the end of his tyranny. Thus, Scheherazade's courage, intelligence and masterful storytelling bring about a peaceful resolution. So now that everybody's up to speed, let's take a listen to the opening verse.
Scheherazade, you enslave me, others bait, cry and save me, wasted words, hatred taught me. Scheherazade, tell me stories.
So let's take a look at this opening verse as being from the perspective of the king. He says, Scheherazade, you enslave me. And of course she's the only person who's held any power over him. But then others begged, crying, save me. And this would be his previous wives who he murdered the morning after their wedding night. But these cries of save me are wasted words because he's filled with hatred. Now, so far, none of this sounds particularly meta, none of it sounds like it relates to Sparks, but to get a better understanding of the double meanings in this verse, you have to look at the type of storytelling that's told in 1001 Nights. The 1001 Nights, also known as Arabian Nights, is a collection of folk tales from Middle Eastern literature compiled during the Islamic Golden Age. It comprises a wide array of stories, with some of the most famous including Aladdin and the Magic Lamp, Ali Baba and the 40 Thieves, and the 7 Voyages of Sinbad the Sailor. But Scheherazade's story isn't just one of the many. These are the tales that she tells King Shahriar over a period of 1001 nights. It's an early example of a framing device. The entire collection of stories are wrapped within the frame story of Scheherazade. We're talking stories within stories, with overlapping themes and meaning, and I hope that's a familiar concept for those who have watched previous videos on this channel. This series, a meta guide to Bulls, is making the case that every song is about how and why Sparks are breaking out of their record deal, yet song by song it tells stories of gigolos and Russian airlines, stories within stories. This isn't unique to Bulls. It applies to everything they've done since at least number 1 in Heaven, and always with a hidden narrative about Sparks' unique approach to creativity. On Gratuitous Sax and Senseless Violins, they made a concept album about a comeback album, and on Terminal Jive, they laid out why they had nothing more to say in the realm of disco music, yet none of this is apparent on the surface. It's how they work right up to this day, and there is always a deeper meaning hidden within these songs, always a comment on Sparks. Scheherazade's framing narrative is therefore a perfect parallel to the uniquely wonderful songwriting process employed by Ron and Russell Mael. If you look at Sparks in this context as a band who always strictly adhere to this seemingly impossible set of self-imposed rules, then the opening verse takes on a completely different meaning. The first line is "Scheherazade, you enslave me," and of course they are bound to this way of working. What I'm claiming is every single song they write has to meet this criteria. They never write a song just because they feel about writing about that one thing. Every single song is layered and it comments on several things and always on Sparks themselves. So they follow this strictly. Now, there's only one exception since 1979 at least, and that is plagiarism. Here they were coerced into re-recording the greatest hits, and from Ron and Russell Mael's perspective, going into the recording studio but not saying anything new would be wasted words. So when they talk about others begged, crying save me, that can be the record label wanting to earn more money from the Sparks record deal and talking them into what they didn't want to do. On the Sparks Brothers documentary, Ron Mael makes it clear that he didn't want to record that album, but he puts it in quite polite terms. However, on this song, it appears that it affected him more than he's letting on in the documentary, because he says hatred tore me, but now they're putting that right, because with Scheherazade, they're now telling stories again.
Ships at sea, all imagined bravery, all imagined loveless bird, colorblindness, Scheherazade, who's behind this?
Here they say ships at sea, all imagined, bravery, all imagined, and this applies to the stories that Scheherazade is telling, and of course they all come from her imagination. But there's another meaning, because as ever this can be a comment on what Sparks are doing right here. If you think of these two things as being subject matter for songs, then they apply to what Sparks are doing on this project. Because a ship at sea is a journey, it's going to bold new horizons, and Sparks are on a journey with this album. The destination is their creative freedom, and to win it takes bravery, because they're tricking their record label and they're making an album that they don't want to have mass appeal. So that's a really brave thing to do. But then why do they say all imagined? Well, let me take you back to what I said in the last episode. I said that they're using a type of songwriting that they know won't appeal to a mass audience. It'll have complete artistic integrity and Sparks fans will love it, but it won't have broader appeal. And the lines that made me think that were nothing too prosaic, nothing too archaic, which can be read to mean that they're aiming for something that's at least a little bit prosaic and archaic, and I may not be poetic, as in I'm not allowing myself to be poetic. And this type of songwriting that they could be describing you also see in The Calm Before the Storm, because if you look at the verses in that song, they talk about these dull situations, like this untapped potential. They say the dogs are letting postmen come and go, the muscle cars are driving way too slow. So in songwriting terms, it's like a wasted opportunity for a more exciting subject matter for a song. And that's what we're seeing with Ships at Sea, because that's a way of expressing the journey that they're on, but it's all imagined. So instead they tell the same story but using a cheap Russian airline in the song Aeroflot, so it's a more dull form of transportation. The same goes for bravery. That's expressed through balls, or even how to get your ass kicked. So it's a much duller version of how they could be telling this epic story. The same goes for the line bloodless blood, because this is a story that's filled with blood, because Sparks are delivering something that they know won't get the recognition that it deserves with this album, and the record label, they also bleed because they're getting tricked by Sparks and they're going to lose them as a band. Then there's colour blindness, and of course on these songs, on the surface at least, the colour is dialed right down with songs about transportation and things like that. So I don't think it's a coincidence that after this album, on Lil Beethoven, they have a song called My Baby's Taking Me Home, and my interpretation of that is it being about winning back their creative freedom. And there they sing a rainbow forms, but we're both colourblind. So I think that's all about dulling down these songs.
Scheherazade, there's a sameness to the world in its plainness, but your worlds are on fire, filled with lust, filled with liars.
So there's a sameness to the world in its plainness, and again that can refer to the seemingly dull subject matter that Sparks are using in their songwriting. Yet the story they're telling across these songs is epic. It's a pivotal moment for the band and they're risking everything, so the world is on fire. And then they say it's full of lust and full of liars, and that applies across the board, because it could be lusting for Sparks' creative freedom, or it can be the record label lusting for a quick profit from selling pop records. Similarly, the liars can be the record company lying to Sparks and, withholding their full creative freedom. And it can also be Sparks lying to the record company, which is hinted at all over the album.
All I want are illusions, Scheherazade, no conclusions, every night, entertain me, no repeats, entertain me.
So here they sing All I Want Are Illusions, Scheherazade, No Conclusions. And of course, if Scheherazade concludes her story, then she'll be murdered by the king. And yet again, it applies to Sparks because they have their meaning in the songs going into the next song. They don't conclude within that one song, but that also applies on albums. So when I was talking about Terminal Jive in another video, I made the case that all of side B is signalling what they're going to do on Want That Sucker. So it's worth checking out that video if you haven't seen it already. And the same thing happens here, because if the purpose of Balls is to break out of their record deal, then we won't know about it on this album because it's being put out as part of that record deal. So we won't find out the conclusion of the story until later on, and we do get the conclusion of the story on the song The Rhythm Thief, which is the opening track of the next album, Lil Beethoven, because there's a line about say goodbye to the beat, but that's not all they say. They also say Auf Wiedersehen to the beat, which is of course German for goodbye. Now, they were on a German record label. They were selling records to the German market. And not only that, but the song before it samples a German commentator. It's a song called Wunderbar, in which a game of football is won. So it's like Sparks have won the game. So that's how it concludes, but that's later on. On Balls, they're kept alive by not getting to the end of the story. They've always got something to say in the future, and maybe that's the reason why their creative streak has outlasted every other band. And that brings us to the end of episode 3. I hope you've seen how deep this song is, because not only does it explain how sparks work by having these stories within stories that never quite conclude and continue further down the line on other nights, it also explains how they've got this epic story, but they're choosing to express it in a way that on first listen at least would sound mediocre to most people, yet it's an album that's as deep as anything that they've done. So thank you very much for watching. I'd appreciate it if you could like and subscribe and comment and share. I'd love to hear what you think about all this stuff, and I'll be back soon with a video all about Aeroflot. So thanks a lot everybody, goodbye.